With 3.16 Scourge League releasing for Path of Exile, unique items are getting a major buff. In the past, a lot of uniques were a good baseline for your build. But over the past 9 years, Path of Exile has had very few chase uniques, much to the dismay of Zizaran, Diablo fans, and people who don't want to think about the stats on their gear. There's been a lot of debate about what makes something a chase item. Is Xerfe's Heart a chase item? It's certainly rare enough, but it's hardly practical to just add Xerfes to your build. It's far too niche. What about Headhunter? Headhunter's aspirational and incredibly powerful, and you can add it to basically any build in the game. But due to the existence of divination cards, a large number of people who strive for Headhunter achieve it. So is it truly a chase item if you can get it reliably week 1? There's arguments either way here, and I plan to talk more about unique items, rarity, and power in a future video. But for now, I'll examine each of the 5 endgame uniques revealed for Scourge League, give my thoughts on their strengths, what they compete with, and some practical applications. This video was brought to you in part due to the generous support of my YouTube channel members and patrons. More about how you can support at the end of the video, but if you want to help for free, you can do so by feeding the algorithm gods and leaving a like on the video, or turning on bell notifications so that you see whenever I upload. If we're talking about powerful unique items that are highly competitive, Mageblood is a perfect example of this. First of all, it's competing for the coveted belt slot, meaning you cannot use Mageblood with a Headhunter. It's also competing with several less expensive options like Flow Untethered, Rislatha's Coil, or Bear's Girdle, all of which can still be build defining. Normally, when you fight a boss in Path of Exile, your flask use is limited. If Headhunter's your one-stop shop for mapping and clear speed, Mageblood is your one-stop shop for boss killing. It does have some limitations. No, you won't be using this to sustain your Dying Sun, Bottled Faith, Cinder Swallow, Soul Ripper combo, but you will be able to do a lot of really cool things, especially if you roll your flasks in the right way. Mageblood constantly applies the effect of 4 magic utility flasks. This means you can use Harvest Enchantments or Enkindling Orbs, along with the Alchemist prefix, to scale flask effect as much as possible. You don't really have to worry about running out of charges, because you're never going to. You're not spending them anyway. Furthermore, this means you can use your flasks in ways that simply weren't possible unless you're a Pathfinder. Do you want to cap your res with some flasks? Well, you can do that with Mageblood. What about having the best pair of boots you've never been able to own? Quicksilver, Alchemists of Adrenaline with Mageblood. Flask suffixes give you options for things like Curse Immunity, Ailment Immunity, Reduced Mana Cost of Skills, Stun Avoidance, and Attack or Cast Speed. And Mageblood synergizes with all of these incredibly well. If you can afford it, I could see Mageblood taking the place of Headhunter in a large number of builds, because while Headhunter is good when you can kill a dozen rares, and it does certainly make it a little bit harder to see how ugly your character is without all that expensive MTX that you don't have, Mageblood just works, constantly. And because it's a constant effect, you can build around it in far more interesting ways than you'd have access to with a swingy Headhunter. Next up we have Stasis Prison, which arguably is the weakest option on the list, and that shows how truly absurd the power levels are of some of the other items we're talking about. On the chest slot, it's competing with things like double influenced rares, replica ferals, replica Shroud of the Lightless, and many others. First off, Stasis Prison will allow Temporal Rift to reserve no mana, which is pretty cool since if you're a skilled player like the god gamer that we know you are, you're going to want Temporal Rift. There's going to be a lot of really neat things you can do, some of which could break the game depending on how it interacts with your ability to turn the aura on and off. At the very worst, it's free Temporal Chains immunity, and you don't even have to wear a Headhunter. You'll also recoup 100% of damage taken as life, which means when you're hit, when you degenerate, over the next second, you will get 100% of that health back. Or, if you're scaling life recovery, more than 100%. This has insane synergy with builds that have high avoidance, things like 75-75 block and a bit of evasion. Because you'll take a hit, you'll heal up from your previous hit before you take that next hit, and this should be all the recovery you need in a lot of cases. Unfortunately, Stasis Prison is competing with Life Gain on Hit in this regard. Life Gain on Hit should instantly top you, and because it's instant, it works just a little bit better. But I could see Life Gain on Hit being on the chopping block for next league, so we might see the rise of Stasis Prison in the near future. And finally, it has one more line that's somewhat relevant. Debuffs on you expire 100% faster. My understanding of how this works is it's similar to cooldown recovery speed, where 100% faster halves the duration of debuffs on you. Like with a lot of previous properties, it's very good but not necessarily insane. However, this can get some absolutely bonkers corruptions and scourge modifiers. More to come on how Scourge interacts with uniques in upcoming videos, and why this is the biggest buff to uniques that we've seen across the board ever in the history of Path of Exile. Even in its current state, I strongly suspect Stasis Prison will be one of the best defensive chests that you can wear. On the other hand, if your damage feels a little bit lacking, Uul-Netol's Vow, a reward from the new Flawless Breachstones, will let you add a 7th link to whatever's socketed in your body armor. This competes with +1 gem amulets and All's Uprising, so it might be a choice that you're a little hesitant to make. But what if your build doesn't scale that well off of gem levels, or what if you have all the auras you need already, like if they're being provided by a friend? What if you're playing a skill that scales considerably well off of gems, or where you can't fit enough utility in, like slams? What if you're playing Archmage, where your damage scales multiplicatively both off of the gem's actual damage bonus, but also off of a mana multiplier? There's a lot of really cool things for Uul-Netol's Vow, and it should enable some skills that in the past haven't been quite playable because they needed just that one extra gem link. As powerful as Uul-Netol's Vow is, I do feel like it's going to be overshadowed by Stranglegasp. At first you might be saying, well, 3 additional enchantment modifiers. What's so special about that? It's only 4 anointments. That's right, it's 4 anointments. And remember, many notables across the tree are having their stats increased. So here's a few examples of things you might be able to do on Stranglegasp that you couldn't do in the past. Like, you're playing a Slayer, and you already have a bunch of Frenzy and Endurance charges. You don't really want to go all in for the Badge of Brotherhood, but you do want a little bit of extra damage. Well, you could always just anoint Infused Instability and Overcharge. Maybe put Assassination in the last one. What about a life-based Necro, and you want to get 9,000 life? Well, how does 40 to max life, 44% increased max life, 30 strength, regenerate 1.6% of life per second, and 10 life gained on kill sound? This is just by accessing notables which you don't really have in close proximity, but are powerful elsewhere on the tree. It's a way to get all the damage, work in a ton of max res, or add unique defensive mechanics which you wouldn't otherwise be able to leverage. You kind of just take the best anoints and multiply it, and that's your amulet. I suspect this is going to be 60x minimum, if not 100 plus, because for so many builds, this is going to be your best in slot, and it will be more powerful than a perfectly crafted rare. Finally, yesterday, we were all teased when the Scourge page revealed some fancy looking gloves. These turn out to be Gravebind. Again, this competes with a lot of other powerful uniques, Atziri Security, Hateforged, and Asenath's, though I'm not sure Asenath's is really putting up much of a fight in this one. The main line of text that's interesting is, nearby enemies killed by anyone count as being killed by you instead. Of course, this raises a lot of questions. What is nearby? Are we talking about the sort of nearby that's smaller than your melee range, or the sort that extends nearly to the edge of your screen? What's anyone? Players? Minions? Will traps, mines, and totems count? Or are they not someone because they're innately not people? But are zombies people? Do zombies have rights? Does this effectively mean when a nearby enemy dies, the kill is attributed to you? Or does this mean direct agency is required? It must be killed by an entity that exists. These gloves seem like an excellent way to add a bunch of MF to your party, or grief in a rota by stealing all the Headhunter buffs for yourself, using negative quant, or various other detrimental effects. I don't think that was the intended use of the gloves, but I'm sure someone's going to do it, and it's going to be hilarious. On this one, without seeing the gloves in action, I'm left with more questions than answers, but overall I do feel they're a bit better than Asenath's and could have some spicy applications when combined with an explodey chest and something like Summon Reaper that already lacks on clear despite having pretty respectable single target damage. So are these items enough of an endgame chase item for you? Which ones will you be trying to integrate into your builds? And do you think any of them are strong enough that we'll see them nerfed by the end of the league? Personally, I suspect Mageblood might see nerfs, as the way it interacts with flask effects and suffixes might be just a bit too game-breaking. But who knows? It could be rare enough that it's the same price as a one-socket Voices or an Exploding Nebulous and doesn't have a big impact on the economy as a result. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on these items and chase items in Path of Exile in general down in the comments below.